Hey guys, today I'm going to be talking about movies. Something different, obviously, from the kind of standard thing. I think the last time I did a movie thing, it was like almost a year ago at this point. So basically, this time around, I think I'm going to try to squeeze in movies and stuff that not only I like or admire, and I'd rewatch over and over again, but movies like stuff that I have trouble liking, that I really want to like, but I can't for the life of me can't pinpoint what it is that is kind of off to me. But yeah, it's it could be a matter of taste, it could be this or that, but yeah, I'm gonna try to talk about this kind of stuff, more free flowy type of thing. I have a list here that I'm gonna kind of refer to awkwardly, but yeah, I have certain things I don't know if I wrote this down, but before I forget, because this list is basically changing. Often I kind of rectify or edit little things and redact certain things and that, but most of the categorizations and stuff. But stuff like Aronofsky with Requiem for a Dream is a movie that is very impactful, and it's I think it is kind of a necessary watch, but it's also very begrudging. It's almost to the point where it's I don't really want to watch certain. I've seen scenes of it, big chunks of it, over the years, and the stuff since I first watched it, maybe 7-8 years ago, maybe. But I haven't seen full. I haven't rewatched the whole movie. And the reason is maybe it is a personal thing, that maybe it's a personal impartiality that maybe I just have a problem with the way that Aronofsky can, because for the most part I think his reputation precedes him. I think he's a pretty phenomenal director in many ways, but he does do things he has a problem with writing and stuff like that. I like Black Swan. I'll rewatch that, but plenty of times. And it's almost enjoyable in the sense that it's it's so high stakes, and there's dancing, and there's performance, and there's so much ambiguity of who's who, and the self, and the persona and kind of stuff like that, and a little bit Bergman's persona, I'll get into him a little later on, but I just think the main thing is with Aronofsky is his writing, and this was with The Whale, his the latest one he did, and it it was based off a play, I believe. So I don't want to dig it too much, or I don't want to trash it too much, because I feel there are people that have already given really good cohesive reviews that address their problems with it too. But I think the main thing with Aronofsky is his it's Mother too. It's this kind of, it's on the nose exposition. It's Mother, it's it's as much as I like the aesthetic kind of finished product look of it, and the acting obviously is really great with Javier Bardem and Jennifer Lawrence did really good. But it's a thing. The main thing with me is the drawback is just the it's whoa, her it's kind of ooh, look how sly, kind of look how clever this is, kind of thing. It's her, it's Mother, and then there's a lady named Eve, and then there's Adam here. It's see what we did there? It's yeah, it's kind of, yeah, it's yeah, a little bit too on the nose. But I don't want to dwell on that too much, but basically there's other movies like that. I think Aronofsky's, I think it's kind of a love him or hate him type of thing. It's either people react strongly and are just oh, I can't stand him. I don't know, I don't want to be the middleman in a lot of things. I know some of the books that I do a lot of books where it's I'll review them and I'll be this is an okay book, I'm not, I'm not crazy about this book, but it's okay. I can see what they're going at, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to be the just agreeing to everything type of thing, but at the same time, there's part of me that, because these things are embedded in the culture, the cultural unconsciousness too, kind of like Shrek, it's kind of hard to ignore them, and it's so many other, when you hear about so many other people lauding it for what it is, it's there's so many people that will, but then there's times where it's really, people for example, I've been talking about the Coen brothers, why am I? The Big Lebowski. Why did I forget that? I don't know. I was just I was like looking maybe to see if one of my DVDs had it, or if I had it, but I don't think I do. But The Big Lebowski, yeah, it's I liked it. It was funny, but it's one of those things where I just kept hearing about it. It's just like, oh, people just kept quoting it over and over again, like, like that rug really ties the room together, or like, it's like that's just, it's kind of like your opinion, man, like stuff like that. It's funny, but I think I went into it watching it with that kind of in mind, and I really did find it funny and stuff, but I didn't quite find it like. It was a little bit like, I don't want to say style over substance, because I feel like that's like writing it off completely. It was good filmmaking, was great writing, very clever, very funny. Like the character, just kind of the flat arc. I think people called it's like a genre of like stoner noir. I think like it's this thing where the kind of inexorable stoner character is kind of, who is sort of thrown in the midst of this very great stuff that's happening, like this very, like the nihilist and all this, and that's actually pretty great character writing. I feel like it's a little bit like a Herman Melville type of thing, like it's just, and there's stuff like that, like I do like that, but I think I went into it watching it a little bit with just hearing about it, and then kind of walking away being a little bit disappointed because of that. But I think if I rewatch it, I think there's definitely the Coen Brothers. But I do really love the Coen Brothers stuff. Like probably one of my favorites. Like I'd say, like No Country for Old Men is obviously, like did a superb Cormac McCarthy adaptation of that, and there were there's a really lesser known, not to say super obscure, because I think even like the smallest Coen Brothers type of production or something like Blood Simple is where their first one, I think, they're which I've yet to see. A lot of their stuff, like even if it's like a kind of a modest budget, like it gets out there just because of like how their reputation already. But yeah, I think like there's one that they did called A Serious Man with drawing a blank on his name, but he did a really great job. He looks a bit like Joaquin Phoenix. He also had kind of reminded me a little bit of his acting too. It's like his acting was very it was very nuanced, very it was just like kind of this, like a Jewish family that kind of faces, Larry Gopnik's the character's name, and his family is just falling apart before his very eyes. Just everything's just falling apart. It was very like absurdist, like very like, I got like an Albert Camus / Kafka vibe from it. Like it was very Kafka-esque, like things like, like all of a sudden his wife is sleeping with this random one of his family friends, and she wants like her part of like the money to like, divorce money or whatever, and then he's like basically being accused of all this random stuff. It's like it doesn't make any sense, but it's like then it did start out with a movie, though, not to give too much away, but it did start out with a movie with like an auguring type of Jewish kind of like an old wives' tale almost, like this, like it would be like your family will be cursed for like 2,000 years or something like that. That's not exactly what it was, but it was like because it's been a while since I've seen it, but back needed to be changed. Where was I? So I was talking about Coen Brothers, Serious Man, great movie, definitely needs a rewatch. So moving on, I did write a list, which I'll awkwardly refer to here. So movies that I want to like but have trouble with. Mr. Nobody by the director is, I think it's Jean, is it Decumeral, I think. Probably far cry from what the name actually is. He's a Belgian director. I can't remember what else he did, but this was one of his famous ones. It has Jared Leto, obviously. It came out 2009. I kept hearing about it, like showing up as like a really good kind of sci-fi, big thematic kind of existential type of thing going on. It did have that. It did have all those things, and I really, which is why I put it on the list. I think I really want to like it because, it really is ambitious in what it's trying to portray. It's like somebody, and it hasn't been too long so I watched it, so I should be able to remember it. But it's, it's about this young guy. It's like Nemo Nobody, and it's like right off the bat, it's like that's a kind of a, not a red herring, but a little bit of a thing a flub that I think is Nemo, basically, I think, is Latin for nobody as well, so it's kind of like nobody, right? It's a little bit reductive, and it's like, well, or not reductive, but a little bit redundant, but in the sense that, I guess maybe that kind of, like, his character was, like, it was, like, basically, what was it, like, had the ability to be able to see all these different timelines and be able to live out all these existences, and which is very intriguing on its own terms. Like, it's like, he's able to kind of live out each one of these lives, but he felt every single one of them, so he's like kind of felt like the weight of all these different romances that he had with all these women. Like, he was like he felt like he couldn't be there for a lot of them because he was coming around the time and he was like hopping through them, and he was like, it was like a great, and they there's all these kind of like auguring, prognosticating kind of people that were like talking about it and saying, like, warning him, like, saying very forebodingly, saying like, this is like a great burden for you. It's like, this isn't going to be an easy life for you to live. So you feel bad for his character. So, like, right off the bat, there's like character, but at the same time, the one thing that I had problem with it is it tried to be too far-reaching. I think it tried talking about things like, there'd be 1 second where he'd be like, a scientist, like, at the start, he was like, writing down chalkboard and talking about entropy, for example, which I found like really cool. I thought that was a cool scene. And the effects in this are really great. Like, it's a very, like, a higher budget type of thing. I'd imagine it had to have had a pretty decent budget for it, to get, like, the amount of, like, special effects in that, like the space, like the, all that. It was like almost like a Nolan flick in that sense, but, the main problem I had with it is that it tried spreading itself too thin. Like, it tried kind of exhausting every point, but without actually kind of bearing the full weight of, like, the narrative, like, the consequences, I think, of it. It's like, well, you're talking about not hyper time, but, my lack of knowledge in the sciences is kind of showing now. But you're talking about, like, hyperspace, or you're talking about different different dimensions. You're living out all these different kind of permutations of reality and all these different things, and it's like that and the problem with that is that once you're committing that to film, it's like there's almost like a thing where it's like, how real do you want to be with it? Like, how real to the kind of that trope you're trying to be like, well, yes, we have freedom to be able to do kind of what we want to do with this character, right? Because all the infinitude of different possibilities, like these different lives he could have lived, and he's bearing the full weight to that. And then, and the other aspect kind of falls into Leto's performance. Like, I felt like his performance is a little bit cartoonish in some ways. Like, and that's I think people do kind of hate on him a little bit too much. I mean, there is the kind of the unfortunate kind of lore he's garnered for doing things like Morbius and all these kind of corny movies, and he's been doing corny movies for quite some time, but he's also done some really good ones. He's been, American Psycho, Fight Club, Requiem for a Dream, which I just mentioned. He's been pretty prolific as just an actor trying to keep himself, like, engaged. And he's, I'll say he's good, but I think he's needs to draw back sometimes, and, like, he needs to rein it in a little bit with because, like, I think, like, there wasn't a lot of believability on his part with the character of Nemo. I think he was, like, a little bit, and not just because it's like, whoa, he's a good looking guy in this thing, and it's like, is that I'm not trying to say, like, just because, like, Jared Leto looks a certain way that he should be cast in a certain way and be like, well, he can't be cast as a this guy flummoxed with space-time and all that stuff. And I think that actually that dichotomy could actually, in hindsight, kind of worked, I think, because it was like how much his character was like maybe the stark difference between his looks, his outer looks as just like a regular attractive young guy or whatever, navigating through the world or whatever, and then also like this intense like inner pain and turmoil for having lived through all these different timelines and stuff. And I think that that does have a catch, like it does, or not a catch, but like I think that does work on its own. I just think the main thing is that it was bogged down, the narrative was bogged down. It tried going in all these different dimensions, that it was weighed down ultimately, and it kind of and I don't want to give too much away. And this isn't any. I think Like Stories of Old had a really good kind of retrospective on this movie that kind of put it in perspective, and the angst of choosing, like like Nemo is like all these different things like that. That's one thing I really loved, and as I thought was beautiful about the movie was that it was the like his when he was trying to choose, like he was trying to it was like, was he gonna have to stay with his father, or was he should just stay with his mother? And it was like he's on the train and he's like at the last second, like it was showing that like even if he did all these things, like even if he did stay with his mother, like X, Y, and Z would happen. Like there was a Brazilian man, like they kept bringing up the Brazilian man who cooked an egg or something, and that I thought that was kind of funny, but also kind of truthful in the sense that there is so much about possibilities and different, it's such an infinitude of different possibilities for that, to the point where like even the slightest thing could have could throw everything off. It's like kind of the old adage, I'd say, is like of anything to do with different dimensions, or just like determinism in general, like like the fact that the slightest like us kind of resigning ourselves and not choosing in its sense is also a choice. So it's like kind of that's like a big thing I liked about the movie. But yeah, like I said, I felt like Leto's performance was a little bit filmed in. I felt like it was a little bit. There were some times when he was like, like you could truly see it in his eyes. It was like, wow, he really tried to, he really did, pretty good here. And then there was times when he was like, as the old man, when he was just, like, oh, I used to do it. I had like, it was almost like a little bit like too on the nose, kind of like cartoonish old grandpa vibes. Oh, sorry. Anyway, so moving on. So The Tree of Life is a movie that I do genuinely like, but the only issue is that not the running time. Like, I honestly have no problem with movies that are long. There are movies that are 3 hours long and stuff. I think this is about that ballpark. Like I do Avatar: Way of the Water. Like I wasn't a fan of the movie. I thought it was kind of like forgettable. No offense, but then again, I don't really like. I'm nothing against James Cameron, but I just don't really like maybe the sci-fi kind of genre as a whole. Like I always thought it was kind of a bit corny, and I always thought I don't know, like I think like fantasy in general, like the fantasy type of thing of just like I was always kind of like a little bit just kind of tired of like not really too into that on just a gut level. But I think like it's like I have no problem with movies being long, even if they're bad movies. Like I just like you'll Charlie Kaufman said something funny, like it was like somebody complained about watching a movie and being like, well, that's 2 hours I'll never get back, and then he was like, well, every 2 hours you spend is 2 hours you'll never get back. It's pretty clever, and true, because time is really like think about how much time we spend on things that we don't really like just on any on any given thing. It's like there's no I just think like the main drawback with The Tree of Life is that it's, well, I'm going to say what's good about it. What I like is the music. The music was great. Like there's a very beautiful track called Funeral Canticle by John Tavener, who I believe was a pretty modern composer. He like he works with the Beatles, I think, in the '60s, I think, and he he basically contemporary in a sense. I think he died in 2017, I think, but yeah, it's like a very beautiful like hymn. It's like a hymnal. There's like all these different voices, and it kind of repeats and it refrains, and it goes from like kind of this like almost like a major key kind of like old. It harkens back to kind of the old, maybe I don't know what you call that, like Monophony, kind of like monk Gregorian choirs that were in the medieval times, so very popular kind of. But then it goes to like this very beautiful minor piece. It's just like it kind of rises up. I'm not doing it justice by simply just talking about. But it was like that is like the main kind of reprise of the movie that drew me in and that got me interested in watching in the first place. As a, even as a teenager, before I just kind of watching clips as it, I remember being like really like, whoa, this is a tense movie. And but I was always like scared of watching it because I thought I wouldn't understand it. And maybe that's even the whole studio today. I think like I don't know if I totally understood everything I was getting at, but I did like this contrast between the mundane kind of like the aspect of being in the mundane world at large, Midwest kind of thing, and as somebody who's worked among the Midwest and Midwesterners, like I kind of get that kind of like a homey. You feel, like they're all very, very nice, very cordial, but there's also kind of like not a distance, but a kind of quiet longing in the neighborhoods and the, amongst the cornfields and the very flat lands. But yeah, it's almost like a second home, even though I'm not from the Midwest, but it's like it has like I have a intense love for the states and, like of Illinois and Michigan and Indiana and all that. I think the main thing, or Wisconsin, the main thing is like, being, I think it was the arbitrariness of it, like showing up with a family in the middle of the Midwest is like almost like a Heideggerian kind of being thrown into the world type of thing, where you're like, you don't really, my limited knowledge of Heidegger, but that actually plays in, because I think the Terence Malick actually studied, I think, not only studied, but also translated Heidegger in university, so that kind of makes sense why his movies are really philosophical and heady. But yeah, it's, I liked that, and then the stark difference between that and like the universe at large, like the before time and like going back in like Paleozoic era, I think, with like the dinosaurs, like so yeah, I thought that was really very well. I thought that theme was very beautifully done in Tree of Life. But the thing I didn't like was, and Terrence Malick does get like this kind of drawback, and I feel like people hate on him too much. But I did see like a number of people like do it, like pointing out like Terrence Malick always do this thing where he all of his stuff are just like very long, kind of unstructured or long meditative shots of people like kind of looking out, or some of it might be kind of like a handheld camera of like two people holding hands, for example, like a couple or a mother and child, and then and then it's a voiceover, like that voiceover of like, and then it's like laugh is just a gift that just keeps giving, and then I don't know, I don't know if that's exactly what they said, but like these people pointing out something that I have seen, but I don't want to hate on Malick so much, because he is so great. I think he is really great at pointing out like the beauty and the mundanity of it, like even if you're thrust into the weirdest, not the weirdest, but like the most uneventful circumstances, you can always kind of see beauty. And I think that's something that he does in his movies, is that even though they can get bogged down in the narrative and like they're kind of like his Christopher Plummer, I think, said that clashed with him a little bit. He was saying like, yeah, his problem is that he needs a better writer, and I think that might be part of the problem, but I don't want to. That's why I say I have some trouble liking it. I really do like it on its own, and it's definitely a lot better than the Duras just being constantly pumped out in Hollywood. Even bad Malick's movie, I'd take over a really, really, really good, whatever type of crap movie that are being pumped out, like an endless Marvel crap. So yeah, but I not only Tree of Life, but there's also Days of Heaven too, with Richard Gere is a really great one as well. Showing like it, back in like in the mid to late 1800s, like these farmers, kind of migrant farmers, making their way through. So yeah, I thought that was a pretty good period piece, though. It was like kind of a little bit uncharacteristic for Malick, because I think Malick does like he didn't do many period pieces, or he is known for that. So moving on. So Wes Anderson is he gets a lot of flack as well for certain things, but I do like his stuff, and I have seen a number of his films. I really like the Royal Tenenbaums. I thought that was it was a fun, even if it was a little bit lacking in substance, and it's just kind of like you go from one, it's just kind of like a sketch of these characters and all their quirks, you know. But I think even taking it as that is, I feel like it's a really great movie. It's just fun, but it also has some pretty, you know, like Luke Wilson's character, like his relationship with Gwyneth Paltrow's character, and I forget their names, but like it was I think that kind of salvaged it too, and brought the movie in a direction where it wasn't just like some of the other Wes Anderson movies. He does get flack for the whole, you know, just the tropes of just kind of reiterating the same thing of like precocious children, you know, like SNL did a really great skit, and I think like Edward Norton and and like all these different people, like basically just kind of like pointing out like how in Wes Anderson movie kind of always has like this intense symmetry and like these shots of like these like long zooming shots. There is something like cozy and like nice about that. I do like the Grand Budapest Hotel. It's a great movie. I think even, you know, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's like one of my favorites, but I do really like, you know, it's like from the soundtrack of like, you know, like that the like a Celestia type of, I don't know, it's like a old Baroque stringed instrument, I think. But yeah, that, and just like kind of like the tone, the setting, the form, and all that, I think what he does is he creates a form, I think, and then from that he's like, oh, I'm free to do all these things, and it's like sometimes that hits with me, and I'm like, oh, I like that. I liked Rushmore too, with Jason Schwartzman. The main thing is like, I think you walk away with it a little wanting, because you're like, huh, like somebody, like I thought like Rushmore with like the fact that like, you know, his his kid is like involved in so many different extracurricular activities, to the point where he's like failing his grades even though he's like fully capable of, you know, it's like you know, and I just thought that was kind of funny, like the way he goes about his academic, you know, career and all that. I just think like the main thing is like lost with Wes Anderson is like his inability, or maybe I don't say inability, but maybe his unwillingness to kind of go deeper into the character and like kind of into the depths of their like in the sense that say Tarkovsky or Ingmar Bergman would. You know, showing beyond like kind of the masks that we wear, and like it's kind of you do see glimpses of that. You see kind of glimpses of profundity and meaning, and like what's the meaning of any of this kind of thing. But it always kind of goes back, or it always kind of retorts back to kind of like, haha, like did you see this kid? This is a very is the Boy Scouts, Eagle Scouts is super precocious and did this thing, and you know, and there was also a kind of a weird one with the Daring Express, I think, where they. Pop Culture Detective had a pretty good video on it, or I don't know if he devoted a whole video to it, but he was talking about like kind of the issue with male fantasies taking part. I'm not going to talk too much about that because I'm not sure how. I haven't seen the film yet, but I did hear it got some flack for like kind of portraying women in kind of weird, sketchy ways but I'm not too sure exactly if that's like enough for Wes Anderson for it to be like a kind of trope of his, but he does. That's one thing I wish he would stylistically, like his movies are just like, they're just a treat, like they're just like a, you know, like they're just like a partial little like sweet treat, like they're just like, you know, and like, you know, the acting, and you know, like, you know, Adrian Brody, for example, like as in the Grand Budapest Hotel, just like just the kind of like the curly-cued mustachioed villain type of aspect of it. It's, I think, is really funny. I just wish he would deep dive, like just like let's focus on a character, let's just do character sketch and really get to, rather than I think what it is like it's like a lot of different kind of characters, which is why some there's a whole thing of like irony on its face is like kind of a lot of, I don't think his movies are ironic. I think they're actually kind of sincere. If you ask me, I just say like, but there are people, kind of a cheap example might be Family Guy that kind of are like, off the top of my head is just kind of like a lot of different references that I'm just kind of, hey, did you guys seen Star Wars, right? Wasn't it crazy how this happened? You guys have seen or heard of David Lynch? Isn't it crazy, like how he did this? And hey, let's have David Lynch show up for a second, and so like, and or hey, you guys know Tom York from Radiohead? He has a lazy eye, and that's like it maybe takes a little take a little quick little thing. It's a lot of like, haha, we are referencing things that you've seen. It's like Red Letter Media with the I think it was called the dude bro thing with they had like a long while back before that, but they did Half in the Bag, and it was like all these things where it's like Mike and Jay were like you're referencing something, you're referencing a thing I like, or you like you brought up something I know, like like something like you ain't like what you talking about, Willis. It's just, like very kind of just very baseline level stuff that it doesn't, but it's people do like peanut butter jelly time, like it's people like I've heard people like reference stuff like that. It's just like with the intent of like some way of gleaning some comedic, trying to exercise some comedic moment from it, and there's like nothing to be done. It's a mind, it's done, it's dead. So yeah, and which in itself can be funny, like the fact that it's so dead, but moving on, I just think to move past those references themselves, I think is a good way to move forward with, as a director or as an artist in general, or just a human being in general, to move past the ironic kind of gesture, tongue-in-cheek kind of hip way of looking at things and being like, yeah, let's just kind of like repurpose it. I think that's a stage of doing things. That's one way of doing thing, and it's not invalid, but it's just lacking in my. It's like, let's move on from here. So anyway, so these are things that I do genuinely like. Paris, Texas, Wim Wenders. I've actually just recently gotten to him because I had heard of him kind of by a serendipitous way of hearing about the musician, singer-songwriter Sybil Bear. And she kind of, some of her stuff does have a pretty good amount of like traction on YouTube, but it's like a kind of like she's a kind of a hidden treasure still, I think. She's like she didn't get a lot of traction during her life, sadly, but she really talented, just like beautiful, haunting voice. She has a song, I think it's called like Tonight. It's very, that has like, its lyrics are so like, just like melancholic, but like there's like a warm there's almost like a bit of a warm comfort underneath it. But yeah, it's like that, there's a lot of nostalgia in that too, but I heard about her stuff, and she's in her 70s now, but she released those I think she released those cassette tapes, I think she wrote when she was like in her teens, I think. So like a pretty long time ago, but like she was featured briefly in one of Wim Wenders' movies, I think. I only just seen one scene with it, but that's kind of how I heard about him, and I was like, oh, I should check him out. So then I checked out his other stuff, and I heard that he did a movie with Harry Dean Stanton as a lead role called Paris, Texas, and I was like, oh, this sounds interesting, so I semi-recently watched it. It's a road movie. It's been called a road movie. It has a very beautiful Nastasia Kinski as his kind of erstwhile wife, and I'm not going to go into a deep dive of it because there's other people on YouTube that kind of already do that, but I'm just going to kind of mention that I do like I appreciate the patience, I think, like the vendors kind of takes a moment and lets it kind of draw out for, without being I know some directors like David Lynch gets flack for that too, just kind of like letting things run as they are, and I'm fine with that. But I think the only thing with David Lynch is like he like Twin Peaks season 3 where it gets so so heady, so dreamy to the point where it's like letting things like just kind of like just linger, let those moments just kind of linger, and it's just like to the point where it's like, is it any, what could be gained from watching it and just letting it watch that, and with against the temptation to kind of skip it and be like, well, or to not really think highly of it. Like, what about this moment with, Cooper, is totally, in a catatonic state, and we're going to see him kind of do this over and over again, which is like, but, that's because I do really like Lynch, and I am a fan. It's just a little bit frustrating sometimes watching these, when it's like, well, are we seeing anything? Like, what, why are we seeing this is a question. I think it's like weird things are happening. Why are the weird things happening? So that's kind of why. Maybe they're not meant to be answered, and that's fine, but, I think, like, Lynch said something to the effect of, like, we so often expect things in life to make sense, or, I'm sorry, we so often, why do people in movies and art expect things to make sense when things in life don't make sense? And I think that's true, like, things don't make sense in life, but I think there's at least some seed of, like, grappling on reality, and I think there needs to be at least a demarcation point of some sort, like just like saying like, well, here's the dream part, okay, and just saying that rather than letting everything just kind of like float. And I think he does it a little bit too much. But Wim Wenders didn't do that too much. It is a traditional 3-act narrative, so he did. But there are a lot of scenes like that kind of in the movie that kind of play out, and he lets it play out in a really meditative way, and he's reconnecting with his brother, and he's like, because Harry Dean Stanton's Travis, has been on the road for a long time, and he's like very troubled because his marriage and like his about his wife, and eventually he's like he's found out there after years of being distance away from his family, and his brother finds him. Or rather, actually, a police, I think, sheriff finds him and then calls his brother, and then he comes and picks him up, and he doesn't even talk for the first like hour of the movie. Well, maybe the first 45 minutes or so, but because it's like at least a 2-hour movie, I think. But yeah, it's like you kind of like just in Harry Dean Stanton's face. I haven't seen him too else. I think he was in David Lynch's stuff too. I think The Straight Story, which I've yet to see. So, but yeah, I think he got started in westerns and stuff. Obviously, like kind of more, not like your classic kind of John Wayne kind of shoot 'em up westerns, but like a kind of more studied kind of thing. But you can see like he's kind of got this. I think Harry Dean Stanton was from the West and from I think is going to be overexposed. So today I'm going to talk about Narcissus and Goldman by Hermann Hesse. Hesse, I think. Just a person. Just a guy that likes books and movies. And I guess, that's very putting a broad berth, but yeah. Probably should have prefaced that at the start of the video, but anyway, moving on. Another movie I had trouble with was The Lobster. I believe Yorgos Lanthimos, Greek director. I should probably know his name better than I do because I am part Greek myself. My father was half Greek, on his mother's side especially. So I should be able to kind of get the names, you'd think, but after all this time I still have trouble with, like the Hukulus or the Sukulus and stuff like that, and there's a lot more, because with Italian it's a little bit easier because there's at least like a kind of cadence of like Chinese. I sound like I'm just desperately like like narrow-sighted with my idea of like, oh, this is the Greek name, but I have to kind of start with an archetypal, some kind of thing to start, stereotypes. I have to kind of start with some hackneyed stereotypes to get my bearing, but yeah, it's Lobster I had trouble with. I have yet to see his other work, and I feel hesitant to actually comment more on this because I've only seen it once and it's been a few years, but I really wanted to like The Lobster. Came out 2015. Colin Farrell. It has a great cast. It has a great idea to it, like the idea of the absurd notion that somebody would just put all these poor single people in a hotel, and it was a hotel or some kind of lodgings. Yeah, it was like because it was a lot more expansive than a hotel, definitely, but it was some resort kind of thing, and that, to just force them to kind of find a partner. I thought it was very funny on its face, but going into it, it's just, I felt like it was, I don't know if it was saying that, well, it's so, the idea of trying dating nowadays, right? Like, hey, I have just as much trouble as anybody, in the dating world nowadays, if not more. This idea of like having to, find something in common with these people, like having the pressure to marry, tie the knot by the time you're 30, and I'm slowly reaching that, or quickly reaching that curve. So I get it. I feel like I'm totally there with you. You got me. But what Lanthimos does is he takes these characters and he takes all these people and he puts them through hell, like, really. And it's like, characters, if they don't use the maids for like the self-pleasure type thing that they had set up, which I thought was kind of, it's like, okay, well, at that point I thought that was a little bit too much even then, but at the same time I also thought like, well, okay, well, I'm still with it. And then like, but to the point where it's like somebody's, John C. Reilly, he's obviously hilarious in this, especially in this movie, even more so than he is in, like these stepbrother kind of things, which I can't stand, honestly. But or anything with Will Ferrell, sorry. But yeah, like he does, like it was. I actually found that kind of, it was like terrifying, but like also kind of funny, like the fact that they, like he put his hand in a toaster because he was like pleasing himself without using. But at the same time, I felt, okay, so what is it saying? Is it saying that these are? Is it making it? So it's making a statement. I think it's trying to both make a statement about what dating and relationships and trying to forge relationships before it's too late. The pressure of relationships in general and romance, trying to force that thing. But I also feel like it's trying to have its own detached little world and have its own special logic to it as well. So it's trying to kind of win on both fields, and I feel like it, if it's going to be in a detached realm where it's like, okay, it's this random resort somewhere in this weird thing, then it should just go all out then and just be kind of like almost, dare say, like science fiction rather. But if it's going to be taking place and kind of taking, I'd say like kind of hone it more in, make it more obvious, I guess. But yeah, I definitely want to see other things. I've heard good things about the killing of a sacred deer, so maybe that'll be a better fit for me. I don't know. So it depends, I guess. Okay, True Detective Season 1. This isn't a movie, but I feel like True Detective is quite cinematic the way it's shot. Total like the Chef's d'Oeuvre, like total cream of the crop, with Harrelson and McConaughey, just a perfect duo. Sure, there's some with I think inevitably with any kind of like really good kind of almost like flawless kind of movie, you'll have the inevitable fan base of like, cringy Sigma kind of like wannabe, kind of like, oh well, let's base our entire personalities off of Patrick Bateman because we saw American Psycho once. Oh, let's base our entire personalities off of Rust Cole from True Detective Season 1 because he said some pretty interesting things and insightful things about, nihilism, even though he actually spoiler alert, he actually kind of rejects it at the end of the, in favor of, because he obviously, continues going on with Marty to, trying to just fight the good fight and soldier on without, succumbing to nihilism. He does it in spite of it, so that's kind of, makes it kind of like invalid, I suppose. So I guess like the main thing I really loved about this was the subtlety and the kind of allure of not leaning too much on the true crime aspect of being like, yes, everything has to be morbid and everything has to be dead bodies all the way, but also kind of tying in a really interesting storyline with the man in yellow, and referencing like Robert Chambers, I think was the name of the kind of Southern Gothic writer who I've read parts of. Is a really pretty interesting prose poetry. It's like a long thing called just The King in Yellow. But yeah, that the lore of that, I found fascinating. It's just like the whole, not just the murders themselves, but the way they took place, like the fact that there was a kind of like a mystical aspect to a lot of the killings in them, and it just like kind of drew me in. But the reason I say only True Detective season 1 is because True Detective season 2, I can't speak for season 3 because actually I haven't seen it. I know it has can't remember the name of the actor, but I've heard good things about the actor. I'm not sure about the contents themselves of season 3 or what it's like, but I still have to see it. But season 2 definitely not for me, and I think it was a collective thing. I think it was like universally kind of panned, I think, and definitely in comparison to the first one as well, because there was a lot of I don't know what they did. He just went all out, because Nick Pizzolatto, he wrote season 1, and he show ran it, and he was like, the kind of mastermind behind it. So, but then again, he also wrote season 2, which makes no sense, because it's like the tonal shift is so, I don't know what he did. I don't know if it was on purpose. I don't know if he just didn't, maybe he was just recreating Thunder. I don't know what happened, but again, Colin Farrell, as much as he can be a great actor, he's just like, his character in that was just so balls to the wall, just like, it was like, oh, I'm gonna like bringing like brass knuckles to his kid's bully's house, and beating him up. That's just, I don't know, that's just like what the statement, I guess, is the the meaninglessness of violence, I guess. Like, I don't know what I mean, it doesn't seem to really be saying much. And Vince Vaughn, as much as he can, as I don't necessarily have anything against him, but I just felt like he was kind of miscast in this as well. He just doesn't really I just don't take him all that seriously, as like a kind of a criminal mastermind either. So is that, I can't even remember. It's been so long since I've even skimmed through it. But I'd say Taylor Kitsch. I think he did Given, The Thing. I think like he was probably the only character in that I remember actually having any investment in it. And I think even with him, they kind of threw him to the wolves too. So again, I believe it is like a universal accepted kind of a post-story fact that people just didn't like the second season. But we'll see, I guess, with the third one. We'll see what happens. Shawshank Redemption, I know that pops up a lot for people on like the IMDb master kind of list to end all lists. You'll always see that kind of thing, and that's probably where I heard it, probably because I always remember seeing it, like at the library or in our possession, I think, as kids, like, but I never actually saw it. I never, I always heard friends talk about it. I always heard people say like, oh, what a great movie, unironically. like it's not too on the nose. It's just tells a great earnest story about a guy who escapes from prison or tries to escape from, and it has Morgan Freeman, to Anthony Robbins. Sorry, I'm getting mixed up with Tony Robbins. All of a sudden, totally different person. But yeah, these, based off of a short story by Stephen King, which is also in turn partially based off of a Tolstoy story, I believe, which I think was called. I think I have this short story collection, which is called "Walk in the Light While There Is Light." Can't be wrong. And I think it's, it pretty much tells the same kind of gist of somebody, a convict escaping from, convict put in jail for the wrong reasons. Like, he's like, but he has to kind of like fess up to it, and, or he has to kind of, he doesn't actually escape in that, but as much as we'd want to, but he he spends, he serves his time honestly, and classic Russian kind of stoicism, but in the moving on with more of my favorite movies and stuff, or movies I should say, honorable mentions and different kinds of things. Just FYI, I am quite tired. It is pretty late, but I figured that the show must go on, so in spite of my tiredness. So the next thing I had on my list, I actually did already talk about this, but at some point the camera turned off, so I have to do it over again. But I was talking about Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, which is actually I have right here, somewhere. Yeah, here it is. I can't remember the name. I feel bad. I can't remember the name of the director. Sorry. But it was a Japanese director, but it's a really great movie. That is has Ryuki Sakamoto also scores it and acts as the lead, one of the lead roles. And there's just David Bowie obviously has a really I think some of his other roles are like The Man Who Fell to Earth, so he was no stranger to the acting kind of world. And he did a pretty understated kind of dramatic role in this. He, without chewing the scenery, there wasn't a lot of this. A lot of this kind of reminded me of the classic right off the bat with the kind of classic war film genre, but it actually goes further than that. Like, I'd argue even further and more impactful, and then say Bridge Over River Kwai, or some other another bridge movie. I think it's A Bridge Too Far. Yeah, that was actually one of my favorite movies when I was a kid. Just because I was like World War II obsessed kid that was obsessed with everything that was related to war, Civil War and stuff like that. So, but then as I grew up, I began to kind of lean a little bit more towards, not away from war movies, but like I began to like things like The Thin Red Line, like Terence Malick, and I didn't understand why I liked it, but it was like because it was an anti-war film at heart. Like a lot of Stanley Kubrick's movies, or anytime he talks about war, a lot of the times, like, Full Metal Jacket is like a glaringly anti-war film. And I feel the same way about Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, because it goes, there's a lot of kind of like a pretty subtle jab at like Japanese imperialism, like this whole culture of like shame and like, and taking it to your death, like the whole thing of like seppuku, and I think like that, like to the like you're so, the idea of like kamikaze warfare, like that you're so very driven towards this idea, like so you're so hell-bent on fulfilling this like expectation of like what Japanese males are supposed to do, and like how you're supposed to act and perform and like be like at your best like physical capacity, to the point where any failure to do so would result in just total shame and castigation, on social castigation. So it would be greater just to suffer your own death on that. So not to try to like cartoonize or kind of not to kind of poke fun at it, but it does I guess humor is a kind of coping mechanism, but I did find this movie kind of, well, it's not a funny movie. There are some lighthearted scenes as well, like, but yeah. Buffalo 66 on here, with Vincent Gallo. I think he came out in 1998. Yeah, I have not seen any other Vincent Gallo. I've heard about, like, Brown Bunny, I think, and was there another one with Mickey Rourke, I think, who honestly might have made a cameo in Buffalo 66, but I've actually not seen any of his other movies aside from this. I figured I'd start out with this because I was a little hesitant to watch Brown Bunny. I've heard, very divisive things about it, like it being kind of very graphic, and and like I said, like I'm not super adverse to watching, like a movie that's like really, like just like barren, just like showing like no holds bar, like what uncensored stuff. I'm not totally averse to that, but I also want to kind of pace myself and be like, well, so never say never. I might watch it sometime in the future, but I did like Buffalo 66 because the character of Bobby in this is just so it's he's somebody, I don't know if it was just somebody like commenting or somebody maybe on IMDb had a pretty interesting opinion on his character in this movie, of someone that you wanted to like kind of hug and comfort one second, and like you just want to be there for them, and the next second you want to like punch him in the face. That kind of describes exactly how I feel about Bobby in this movie. He's just so on edge all the time, and he seems very like excruciatingly worried about like the wrong things, I believe. Like he's trying to impress his parents by, basically hiring this, not hiring, but, basically kidnapping this one girl, played by Christina Ricci in this, into, like, play acting as his, girlfriend, for the sake that his parents won't be, to kind of cover up the fact that he's been in jail for all these years. And that's, I think it's a pretty compelling storyline on its own. I'm not sure to what extent Vincent Gallo, he identifies with the character. He does do some very troubling, questionable things, and there is a bit of a questioning kind of thing at the end when it's like he does, spoiler alert, he does like kind of get, he wins over Layla's affect, his Christina Ricci's in this affection near the end of the movie, and they kind of like do fall in love. And there's also, I feel like that's kind of a cop out, and I feel just on a kind of guttural level that like her affection towards him was like a puppy dog kind of love. It was like a kind of like it was a kind of, she had no clue what she was getting herself into, whereas Bobby Brown, he was like a total like loose cannon. One second he's like very, kind of charismatic, and he's like, he's just trying to, but like the next second he's just kind of stubborn and just hard-willed, and just like just fixated on totally just trying to prove, do the wrong things. Like he's like so fixated on, I don't know too much about sports, but like it does play a big pivotal role in the movie, in the sense that like the Buffalo Brown, like that's basically what he's named after, is like a very sports like kind of thing, and that's like where he comes from in New York, and all these different, the New Yorkness of this movie really comes out. I'm not, being like 7 or 8 hours from New York, it is kind of hard for me to kind of identify with that, because it's not often I go there, and it's kind of a special occasion, but I do kind of understand quite the legend that New York has garnered, especially with its different factions and different things like Harlem, and Hell's Kitchen, and down, like Greenwich Village, and basically how they all play, and like there's, like they're basically like, to me it's like, it seems a bit silly because these places are like literally just like miles apart, but to these, when you go down to the metropolitan level, it really makes all the difference, because it's like everything's so cloistered together. So anyway, so next Trainspotting I put on here just because I've been meaning to watch it for quite some time. To my great shame, I've literally only just watched it like a week ago, about. And yeah, again, when I say like, I'm not saying it's not. I'm not necessarily saying it's on my. Ooh, it's one of my favorite movies ever. I just saw something very culturally impactful about it, like very. Let's check to see if this is recording. And yes, we are. Okay. So I just saw something very interesting with the way it's constructed. It, it's not trying to. It's not coming from a bad place of trying to like shame heroin users or addicts in general, but it's also not trying to glamorize it too much. It's showing like the very like naked, bare, naked aspect of heroin use and how harrowing, no pun intended, it can be. Like how it just it ruins completely, just unravels your life. Like this. I think this is probably like a more effective PSA against drugs, like this and maybe Requiem for a Dream, than some of these corny kind of PSAs you see a lot of the time in schools, and like they just saying like it's cool, just say no, just being, that's the whole thing it's lampooning, is just say no, the whole thing, or just say yes to life, say, choose life, that's what it was, choose life, choose a nice house in the suburbs, all that. Like, I think that's a pretty iconic opening scene. I think that's up there with like Fight Club and a lot of like 90s movies. Like, that's why I wanted to watch it for so long, because I heard it was like a very stands on its own terms, definitely, but it also was a part of a cultural wave. I think Irving Welsh, who in the novel I've actually finished, did such a good job on I think what it was the post punk, I think, scene. It had, somebody described it as like the book as having like the sensibility of like punk, but like also of coming from a smarter, more deeper level. Like it's like not, it's, I think punk a lot of the times it's like very reactionary. I don't know too much about it, but stuff like Sex Pistols and stuff like that, it's coming from more of a instinctual kind of like, just react to the times and how bad, and maybe there's a philosophy something to be said about the, I guess, immediacy of it. Like there's a lot of pent up rage and like the way things are, uneasiness that everybody can kind of see. That's why a lot of the times you feel there's like a cultural kind of connection going on, like a collective unconscious, I guess, with, let's say, like not only punk but stuff like grunge too. Like there's like something about the 90s, at the early 90s especially, with like Nirvana, or like post, or like different grunge bands that were like maybe not so on the nose with their kind of message, like something you could like maybe dance to more, like something like Pearl Jam, or like but I think a lot of this stuff, like what it's getting at, is like a lot of like what happens, like the subculture is like begins to kind of like analyze and critique the culture so much, and it becomes so in vogue that the thing that you become, it's like David Foster Wallace was saying, like the thing that you've critiqued, actually you are now, so you become the thing. So everybody's kind of in on it, and it kind of like ruins the not necessarily the appeal. Well, maybe that, but anyway. So Trainspotting, the only thing I'd say is a little bit too. I felt like it dwelled in the murky aspect a little bit. For me, both the movie and the film, even though it differed in the film, being rather than having the novel was more or less almost like a series of short stories. Not to undercut it by any rate, because it's like still pretty cohesive and thorough, but you almost had to tell from stories like with people other than Mark Renton or Rent Boy. You also had to kind of well, it's also from the point of view of Sick Boy and Spud, and I think, and I don't know if it's Begbie. These other cast of characters are very quite realistic, kind of pastiche representations of what Irving and Walsh probably interacted with in Scotland, and but I felt like there was a little bit too much self-loathing, maybe like a little bit too much of the we're just nothing but Scotland's nothing but a bunch of fat assholes, or like we're something like he said in the movie, like we're colonized by a bunch of fat assholes, like we can't even be